Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the u3a radio podcast. Now, we've all heard of the 3 R's, but in this edition, we concentrate on the 3 P's: poetry, prose and play. I'm Nick Bailey, and in the next half an hour, we'll be talking to the winners of the recent U3a poetry competition.
It's a mix, really. Sometimes it's something funny, sometimes it's something a bit, risque, sometimes it's something quite thought-provoking, I hope, quite thought-provoking.
And we'll hear an extract from a radio play called Fraud of the Rings.
What can I do for you?
Mr. Spencer, I'm calling from your bank, HSBC.
I've just had a text from you as well. And it looks a bit worrying. What's all this about fraudulent activity?
That's what I'm calling about.
But we start with prose, and a creative writing group from Lee and District U3a that has self-published its own anthology called Tosca's Dress. The man behind it is Peter Lewis, and Peter Clift asked him if he had a background in writing.
Writing, not professionally, only insofar as I taught for about 43 years in primary schools. And one of my joys was encouraging children to write, to read good literature and to write. But my forte was creative writing. But it's only really since I retired about 8 years ago that I got into writing, joining writing groups.
So have you had anything actually published?
The only thing I've had published, which is called The Snow Fox in Normandy, I'm very much a Francophile. Lots of people have written their version of living the dream, going to France, settling in a village somewhere, often renovating an old wreck that the French wouldn't have anything to do with, and then writing their story. What started out as a short story, boy meets girl, girl meets boy, became my novel, which I called A Snow Fox in Normandy. And the other thing I've self-published is an anthology of my own short stories, and also the anthology Tosca's Dress from the U3a group.
Is it just you, or would you say it's more kind of a team effort?
Well, certainly with the U3a anthology, that was very much a team effort. It's over a year ago now, well over a year ago now, when we were still meeting once a month. And one particular session, the writing I felt was so good. The writing that group members were reading out, poetry and fiction, and I actually suggested to the group the possibility of us producing our own anthology of prose and poetry. The following month, I brought along my own work and let everyone have a look at them, feel them, look through them and so on. And the consensus was, yeah, let's go for it. My wife then took over really, because she's quite a whiz with computer matter. She is very much better at doing that than I. And so it was a team effort in that sense. Possibly the anthology might never have seen the light of day under my own steam, but with Jill helping me or doing it for me, it did see the light of day. It's a very gratifying feeling. So if anybody is feeling as if they could write something, feels that they could do it, there's only one answer to that: have a go.
An enthusiastic Peter Lewis. If you'd like a copy of Tosca's Dress, named after the first story in the anthology, it's available from the Lulu website at lulu.com. On the subject of writing, here's a final reminder of the National U3a Creative Writing Competition for 2021. The judges are looking for an original short story on the theme of unexpected, with a maximum of 1,500 words, and it needs to be submitted no later than 12 noon on the 28th of May. All details on our website at u3a.org.uk. And from prose to poetry, and the results of the U3a poetry competition, which had nearly 200 entries. All the poems had to be on the theme of hobbies or interests, with a maximum of 16 lines and with a rhyming component. Ella Watts caught up with the 3 winners, starting with Sally Lang from Wigan U3a, who came third, and wondered if she had a literary background.
No, I wouldn't say so. Having said that, I was of a generation where, was it Friday tea time or Saturday morning was always a trip to the library. the local library. And I remember the smell. I remember just, you know, my dad dropping us off at the door. He went to the adult section and we went into the children's section. And so books were always around the house, not necessarily poetry. I think it was only when I came to, I did a degree very late on in life, and I studied English. And then I started to sort of a bit more get into poetry. I found some of it really unfathomable, some of it amazing, but I like the rhythm and just the sound of it.
When did you actually write your own first poem?
Oh, goodness, Ella. Do you know, I'm not sure. I have a feeling, and this is really quite sad, that it was when I worked initially as a medical secretary, and then I went back to uni and did a teaching degree. And I think when I was a teacher, I started just jotting things down. And especially when colleagues had birthdays or were leaving, people used to look to me to write some sort of, you know, they looked to me as their poor woman's Pam Ayres. And it sort of went from that, really. So people asked me to just do things like that. And then I started. And during lockdown, as with everybody, there's been an awful lot going on. Terrible, terrible times. And I started making cards. I've never drawn before. And I started really getting into my poetry, and I started putting it on my Facebook page. And quite a few people sort of liked it and said, oh, will you write another one? Some were funny, some were sad, some were, and it just, when the feeling, I don't know what Roz and Victoria think, but when the feeling comes over you that you have an idea, I just like to sit down and bash it out. And one of the most useful things I ever learned to do, because I was a medical secretary in a former life, was type. So I can get ideas down. You know, they might not be brilliant ideas, but I can get them down very quickly. And that really helps sort of, you know, you coming up with something. So I don't consider myself a poet, but I do enjoy doing it. And people seem to like reading some of it.
Is that how a poem developed? You have some sort of jotting?
Sometimes it just comes straight out. I went for a walk the other day and I live near the local hospital, and the grass verges were covered in crocus and they looked amazing, but they're not really the most elegant of flowers, are they? And that just stuck. So I got back and wrote a very short one about the crocus, which ends up with it saying something about their cheerful little buggers. So and that took 10 minutes. So I don't know. Sometimes I'll work on something longer, but very often an idea just comes. I'm sure it's the same for Roz and Victoria.
And I think you had inspiration in an apple tree once, didn't you?
It wasn't so much being in the apple tree. It was having to pick up all the branches that were being trimmed from the apple tree by my husband, who is the one that gets to play with the chainsaw and the ladders and all the electric equipment. And I end up being the one who picks up the privet. So he was up the apple tree, and I thought, why am I always the lackey? Why is it always me picking up the bits? And the idea came to me. So I ran inside, wrote the poem. And fortunately, by the time I got outside, he was still up the tree and he hadn't fallen. I don't think he noticed I'd gone, but he was quite amused, and maybe I'll get the chainsaw next time.
Now, Sally, I know you're going to read this poem for us. It's a lovely poem, and it's called Now How to Amuse Me Today.
Now, how to amuse me today. It's week 1 of lockdown and spirits are quite high. The sun is shining unseasonably and I've loo rolls piled to the sky. But how to fill those empty hours? What task will lift my heart? An expensive trip to an online store and voila, I'll take up art. It's week 3 of lockdown and it seems art isn't for me. The walls and my clothes are spattered with paint, but a Banksy I'll never be. So back to the net. What can I try next? Oh, look, there's a wool shop online. I'll be the best knitter the world's ever seen, a creator in cashmere and twine. It's week 6 of lockdown. Knitting wasn't my thing. It's trickier than it looks. Needles and yarn are consigned to the loft along with the pattern books. But onwards and upwards, I won't be discouraged. I've signed up for yoga on Zoom. I've thrown out the spare bed and purchased a mat. I now have my own Zen room. It's week 10 of lockdown and I'm up and about. My slipped disc is healing, they say. I've replaced the bed in the spare room upstairs and the yoga mat's now on eBay. I'm taking a break from my internet buys. No more hobbies for me from now on. I'll just stick to browsing. Oh, canoeing looks fun, but I'll wait till the virus is gone.
You couldn't be in a better place than the u3a for finding the next hobby.
Yeah.
Well, that was wonderful. Now, we're now going to talk to Victoria.
Thank you.
Victoria Sherratt, and she is from Madeley.
It's the Madeley u3a, although I actually live in Newcastle-under-Lyme.
Now, you got second place in the u3a poetry competition with a great poem called Missing Golf. But first of all, let me ask you, did you always listen to poetry, read poetry?
Not really, no. No, I was a great reader as a child and young person. I did love some poetry, particularly A.A. Milne. And I loved When We Were Very Young and Now We Are Six. And I think I just loved the rhyme and the rhythm. And that's probably what formed me as a poet.
So when did you first write a poem?
I wrote poems when I was quite young, but the first kind of verses I really remember writing were a joint effort with my family once I was a teenager and Christmas had become a little bit samey and boring. So with my two older sisters and my parents, we decided to write a pantomime in verse and to act it out. So it was about the Sleeping Beauty, but we actually called it the Sleeping Bag. So that was a lot of fun to write together. And then I think from then on, I used to catalogue holidays and other experiences just in rhyme to recall things and to make people laugh, because that's what I really love doing, make people laugh and smile. So a lot of my poetry is with that end in mind.
And does your poetry develop from one idea, or do you jot things down?
I jot things down. I belong to some poetry writing groups, so sometimes I work hard in response to a project that's set for us and we have to come up with something. Other times there's just an idea that sits in my mind and rhyming words begin to come. And as well as a poet, I'm a cyclist. So I cycle quite long distances and it's something that we've still been able to do throughout lockdown. And I think there's something about the rhythm of the pedalling that goes with creative energies. So a lot of my best lines come when I'm on the bike and I have to say to my husband, stop, I've got to write something down. So normally I have my phone with me, so sometimes I record it into my phone because you can lose things on the way and you have to go back to that exact point in the road to find them again.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to hearing your poem, Victoria. It's called Missing Golf. Would you like to read it to us, please?
I would love to. Missing Golf. I know it's rather early, dear, but hubby's still in bed, and I really need to have a chat without him or your Fred. How are you getting on, dear? Are you missing golf, like me? Missing all the time we had without their company? I used to think it was too much, them playing every day, but now they cannot play at all. Do you find Fred's in your way? My husband is a lovely man, but I'm having to confess that I liked him so much more when he was home a little less. The lounge, my one-time pride and joy, has become a putting green. He's trampled down the carpet and I'll never get it clean. He's very keen to practice, but I think he's lost the knack. Last night he hit the telly screen, such a mighty crack. His mobile phone pings all day long with dreadful sexist jokes. Does Fred do that to stay in touch with other golfing blokes? Well, perhaps I'd better go now. Take him his cup of tea. I know he's missing golf a lot, not half as much as me.
Do you know what? There's some very long-suffering husbands in this group.
He did ask me to point out that the bit about breaking the television was poetic line. A lot of his mates after they heard this, because I circulated it around the golf club, a lot of them texted him and said, "Did you really break the television?"
Oh, thank you very much, Victoria. That was lovely. And so we're going to move to the winner of the U3a poetry competition. So we're talking to Roz Parker now. And Roz was originally from Trowbridge, U3a, which is where you wrote the poem, I understand. But you've now moved to Shepway in Kent. So you're sort of between U3as, I believe. And I think it's terribly brave of you to move in lockdown.
Shepway U3a, but I'm actually in Hawkins, which is a part of Folkestone. Good to be here, and it was fun moving in lockdown. I'm sure I ought to be writing poems about that.
I think you should actually, if not a book. Roz, do you come from a literary background? Were you surrounded by poetry?
I was, like the other two beautifully poetic ladies, I seemed to have it round me at the time, as a child. And I would read. Yes, I read, but not poetry particularly. And I can't remember writing poetry until I was 11. I can remember a poem that I wrote when I was 11. The reason I remember that is that I actually won a competition with it. So that was the first and only time until now that I've got any fame. That was just standing up and reading my poem in front of the school when I was in a brand new school, brand new class, and standing up in front of hundreds of girls that I didn't know and reading this poem that I can still remember the first verse of, ridiculous as it seems.
Do you want to give us that first verse, Roz?
Yeah, I can do, I think. The reason I wrote it, I think, was my brother used to be, he's much older than me, my brother, he used to be a bird watcher, and he gave me a book of Observer's Book of Birds. And I read this book thoroughly through, looked at all the pictures and could remember all the birds in order. And my poem came to me as birds. So remember, I was only 11, okay? Birds of the summer, birds of the spring, to them I whisper, when will you sing? And I can't remember the next little bit. And that was good, wasn't it, really? But it did go on a bit about different birds, and the cuckoo and the quail and all sorts of birds.
So are we saying that your very first poem was in answer to a challenge?
Well, as far as I can recall, yeah.
How do your poems develop? They're not all led by the books that you read, are they?
No. Funnily enough, day by day, like Sally and Victoria, things come and you have to write them down quickly. But very often I read in the kitchen doing something and I'll talk to my husband about something and it'll come out in rhyme. And it'll come out scanning and rhyming without even meaning to, have you put the kettle on, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Stupid things like that will just automatically fall into poetry.
I can see husbands figure largely in this one as well.
My husband is not in any way, shape or form like this one in my poem.
But your poem is called Philately Will Get You Nowhere.
And yes, I did used to collect stamps as a child. And for a little while, my husband did try to be a postman. But there it was for a very short time. And this is the poem that bears no relation to him or me. Philately will get you nowhere. I am a stamp collector. It's my hobby and delight. I fill my albums every day and dream of them at night. My husband is a postman. That's a help to some degree. For when he's posting letters on his round, he thinks of me. He pedals round the houses, dropping letters through each door. His bike has 2 flat tyres, no gears. It really is a bore. To add a little interest, my needs invade his mind. But second class are common stamps, and rare ones hard to find. But just last week he said of one that really made him stare, "It's out of date, the price too low, unfranked, it's very rare." Alternative to charging excess postage for the mail, he brought it home against the law and put it up for sale. I used to be a stamp buff till my husband went to prison. He stole and sold a penny black that clearly wasn't his'n. So now my hobby's different, and until he's out again, I've found another pastime. I'm not telling you his name.
Now, the one thing I've noticed from those 3 wonderful poems is they are all humorous. Is that the way you like to express yourselves? It's just pure humour.
That was one of the rules of the competition. It had to be funny.
I've also written things that are very much not humorous, and I tend to write humorous poems that are in rhyme, and the more serious ones, like I've written about my mother's death and about missing the grandchildren through lockdown, about losing our 4-year-old son on a beach, which is still so present with me. I had trouble actually reading the poem after I'd written it. So not always humorous. I feel like I've got two parts of me, the rhyming humorous side that make people smile and the more kind of serious in-depth side.
And Sally, I can see you agreeing with that very much.
Yeah, very much so. And again, it's a feeling sometimes. I saw a poster the other day, and I think there's been a few of them just saying, be kind, because of the difficult times we're having. And I wrote a poem called Be Kind, because I think kind is people use it flippantly, and you can see people rolling their eyes if you say be kind. So I wrote a poem about the fact that kind is actually a really strong, thing to do, to be kind. It's not easy to be kind. And it was all about that. And I've written a few about how we're feeling during the pandemic, and that's helped me. But just as Victoria said, it's a mix, really. Sometimes it's something funny. Sometimes it's something a bit, risque. Sometimes it's something quite thought-provoking, I hope, quite thought-provoking. And funnily enough, when I put them on Facebook to my friends, the ones that get the biggest reaction and the most comments tend to be the ones that are a bit more serious, a bit more sort of heartfelt, about, the fact that we've all had really rubbish days over the last 12 months, and days when it's been really hard to get out of bed and just see a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think people appreciate that, because it's that common experience, isn't it? And they think, gosh, I'm not the only one who's thinking, can I really be bothered putting the makeup on today? Or, I think I wrote one about shaving my legs. I couldn't be bothered.
Well, let me just say thank you. Thank you to Roz Parker, to Victoria Sherratt, and to Sally Lang. Thank you very much. There's an amazing amount of talent in this Zoom call.
Ella Watts with her trio of poets. And if you want to read all the winning entries, just go to our website at u3a.org.uk. Well, we've had prose and poetry, and now it's time for the play. In a moment, an excerpt from a radio play written and performed by members of Much Wenlock u3a called Fraud of the Rings. But first, to tell us about it is Alison Richards, who is a member of their creative writing group called Writers on the Edge, and who plays the part of a scammer who eventually traps her first victim. Alison, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Can I ask you how this came about in the first place?
The original idea was from a committee member of Much Wenlock and District u3a, a gentleman called Glyn Emery, whose background before he retired and joined the u3a was as an IT director of a major engineering company. And he'd been very impressed by a health and safety play that they'd had, so using theatre as education. And he challenged us as the creative writing group in Much Wenlock to try and come up with something to educate people about scams. And we decided we'd have a go at that, and looked at particularly the authorised push payment scam. And we wrote a play about it. And unfortunately then there was no performing arts group to take it on. So we then amended it, and it took some time to do that, into a radio play. And that's the excerpt you're going to hear, and it ended up being a 25-minute long piece. We and some other members of Much Wenlock and District u3a recorded with the very kind help of a former BBC radio technician, a gentleman called Dave Griffin. So hopefully the quality is quite good.
Did you all have a part in writing it?
There was 4 of us specifically from Writers on the Edge who got involved with the script writing: myself, Joe Jackson, Maggie Bardsley, and Jill Griffith. Jill Griffith might be a name familiar to some u3a members, as she won 3rd prize in the National Creative Writing Competition actually last year.
And who came up with Fraud of the Rings?
I have to confess that one was mine. It was either that or Swindler's List, which we managed to shoehorn into the play itself.
And how long did it take to record?
We just spent one afternoon doing it. We did a lot of the scenes in one take, and I think that has to be down to the expertise of our former BBC technician rather than the actors, who are all very much amateurs, which you'll probably tell when you listen to it. We had good fun doing it.
But what about the writing of it?
The writing took much longer. We sort of storyboarded it first and came up with a few ideas, how we could generate the learning as much as the entertainment, really. We wanted to try and achieve both those objectives. And we storyboarded it out. We decided we'd try and have somebody who was just dismissive of the call, somebody who actually, the second character in the play, really confuses the scammers and the scammers give up on him. And then the third character who does actually get scammed, is the one who really perhaps you would have least thought was going to be, shall we say, taken in. Perhaps somebody who's got a financial background just happened to be on the hop that day, and the scammers have built up some expertise and managed to reel him in. I have to say, we were all a bit paranoid after we wrote it. I kept ringing my bank and checking things.
Hello, 728519.
Good morning. Can I speak to Mr. Graham Spencer, please?
This is he, but you'll have to speak up. I'm not as young as I was, and I'm getting a little bit deaf. Hang on a minute, I'll adjust my hearing aid.
God, we've got a right one here.
Now that's better. What can I do for you?
Mr. Spencer, I'm calling from your bank, HSBC.
I've just had a text from you as well. And it looks a bit worrying. What's all this about fraudulent activity?
That's what I'm calling about. Have you got a moment?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm in a bit of a rush. I've got everyone coming round for a committee meeting in half an hour, and I haven't printed the papers yet. It's the AGM.
This won't take long, sir, but we do have to, address it now.
Can't it wait till I'm less busy?
I'm afraid not. There's no need for alarm, but this is the fraud department. We've noticed some unusual activity on your account that we'd like to check with you. It appears that significant amounts of money are being withdrawn from your account. If you can verify them, then there isn't a problem, but if not, it suggests your account has been compromised and we need to take urgent action. Have you recently made a number of large withdrawals? I mean, in the last 3 days?
Definitely not. I've just come out of hospital, had my hip done. And the only upside of being in there is that I haven't spent any money.
Oh dear, well, that's what we're worried about, you see. There have been 3 rather large withdrawals attempted from your account.
What sort of withdrawals? They can't be cash. I don't use the ATM much these days. I've gone contactless, haven't I? Up with the latest technology.
Yes, that's right. I can see that on your transaction history right here. Unfortunately, I can also see this other activity that we now know isn't you. We have managed to block it, but it suggests your account has been compromised. We must take immediate action. Would you be able to go to your branch this morning?
Well, no. I mean, like I say, I've got a committee meeting.
Mr. Spencer, it's imperative you get to your bank today.
Look, I'm not really mobile yet, what with my hip, you know, and I'm the treasurer. I have to print out the accounts, and they can't buy the hobnobs without me. I have to be there. Thought all this accounting lot would be behind me after I retired, but looks like I'm still counting beans. Perhaps my wife could get there tomorrow.
Mr. Spencer, this really is urgent. It's important that you do go to the bank, but don't worry. If you really can't get there today, then we can do this another way. Over the phone? You can do it now. It'll only take 5 minutes if you can get online.
Perfect. Come on. I'm already logged in. What do we need to do then?
First, we need to set up a new, secure account. Then we'll transfer your existing funds into it and close the old compromised account.
That makes sense. Let's get on with it then. I've got to get the coffee on soon.
I've got your address here as 12 The Hollies and your postcode is FT143RC.
Yes, that's right. Foxtrot Tango 143 right Charlie. Sorry, I mean Romeo Charlie. Just my little joke.
Marvellous. All you have to do is follow your normal security process to transfer the balance. I'll give you your new secure account number when you're ready.
Yes, I'm just typing in my memorable answer now. I get you to ask me, who is your favourite member of Pan's people?
I know, that's so funny.
Isn't it? It's Babs, by the way.
Of course. Who the hell are Pan's people?
Sorry?
I love Pan's people.
Right, I'm ready for the new account number now.
Good. It's 518-347-19. Have you got that?
Yep, 51, 83, 47, 19. Same sort code, obviously.
Yes, that's right.
And transfer the full balance?
Yes, the full balance.
Make payment, tick, and confirm.
That's great, Mr. Spencer. That's put your mind at rest, and it saved you a trip to town, hasn't it?
Yes, thank goodness. Well, I must dash. Thanks for your help.
No problem. Have a good day. If you have any questions, just give us a call back. Yes! Job done!
Oh, congrats, Specs. Here's to it being the first of many.
Thanks, Harriet. Can't wait to see how much we've made. What do we say? Not for the few, but for the many. How far do you think I can travel on my winnings?
Oh, well, never mind that. Let's close that account down now and put that money where it should be, in our pockets.
An extract from Fraud of the Rings, written and performed by the Much Wenlock u3a Creative Writing Group, with Alison Richards as Bex, Mac Bardsley as Graham Spencer, and Laura Fennell as Harriet. If you'd like to have a recording of the entire play, just let us know through communications@u3a.org.uk. And you can use the same email address if you have anything you think needs a wider audience, such as the play we've just heard, or you know of a quirky group, or you've done something unusual. We'd love to hear from you. And that address again, communications@u3a.org.uk. And that's it for this edition. My thanks to Peter Clift and Ella Watts for the interviews, and to Ella for producing the podcast. Until next time, this is Nick Bailey saying goodbye.